Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by a very special guest indeed, Last Stand Media's coordinator, shopkeep, co-host of Punching Up, my fiance. Soon to be wife, my wife, soon. Micah Watson. Micah, welcome back to the show, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing quite well today. You know, it's been a busy week for us. As you mentioned, wedding, it's coming right up. So all these last odds and ends of, getting the final RSVPs, finalizing, the bakery order, the florist order, all those things are kind of wrapping up now. So I'm looking forward to the wedding, but this week itself is pretty hectic.
Yeah, I want to get to it. Like, let's go.
Yes.
Let's go. Stop lingering and let's just go have fun and drink and toast and get married and stay in nice hotels and do all those kinds of things. So I'm looking forward to it as well. But I thought we would gather here today, kind of impromptu, because we weren't necessarily planning on doing this until you and I had kind of just both coincided in beating the same game. And we're like, well, we should probably just do something about it, right? Because no one else in the company, I think, is necessarily interested in talking about it. I think Maddie might have done something on his retro channel about the game, but I know he's busy as well, so I didn't want to necessarily bother him. But Sea of Stars, which launched in August 29th, in fact, from Sabotage, their second game. It's in the Messenger universe. Their Messenger game, The Messenger, came out in 2018 on Switch and PC, then 2019 on PS4, and then it was ported to Xbox, I think, the next year. And you don't need to have played one to enjoy the other. In fact, I had no idea how the game's even connected until I looked it up, and they do connect, and it's pretty cool, and we'll get into that. But so we thought we would just talk about this little game. Kickstarted right at the beginning of COVID in March of 2020. And I remember when it was launched, and it just, you these games come and they're announced, and then you kind of forget. It's like, oh God, it's so far away. 2023 gives a shit. And then it finally comes, and here it is. So the game has arrived. It's on all relevant platforms, sold 250,000 copies so far, probably many more. They haven't announced new numbers as of the time we're recording. And it's also on Game Pass on Xbox, and it's on PS Plus Extra and Premium. So you can play it there as well as of the time we're recording. But I was happy to buy it a la carte. I know you did the same on Switch. So let's get into Sea of Stars and talk about it a little bit. You and I are both role-playing game fans. Not necessarily a rarity here at Last Stand. Dustin's also a fan, Maddie. But it'll be fun for you and I. I don't think you and I have done a show together, just you and me, since the one where we met, right? Is that true? Or have we done one, an interstitial one?
I have to think. I think we did one other, but I'm honestly... I think Last of Us Part 2.
Right. Or
we
like
did
revisiting
that together.
It. Right,
but yeah, it's very rare that we have a show that's just the two of us.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, good times. All right, so let's get into it. Sea of Stars. Micah, what did you think of the game?
Yeah, my impressions from very far away. I liked the game a lot. I really enjoyed the combat system. This is, I guess I'd call it like active turn-based combat, in that you have, it's turn-based. You have, extra damage if you, complete the right button press, with the timing. You can defend better and not take as much damage if you also get the timing right. I enjoyed that specifically because, as we've talked about on other shows, keeping, engaged and focused in a game, not multitasking as much, has been difficult for me. And I love turn-based games. They're my favorite type of games. But those are the easiest ones for me to start slipping, check my phone type thing, because it's a little more passive. And this game really kept my attention. And that helped a lot for me to, get through this in a timely manner and just really stay focused on it. So that was, number one, the combat. I really enjoyed that. I hadn't played a game like this before. Dustin, some other people had mentioned to me similar games that I just had not experienced. So for me, this was all new and very exciting. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. I feel like, we'll get into it. I feel like the ending, a little disappointing, but, the overall experience, very positive. I would definitely recommend this game to anyone who's a fan of JRPGs.
Yeah, I think most games, in my estimation, this is true of a lot of things, actually. A lot of fiction is just, a lot of it is about the journey. I hate, it's kind of like a cop-out to say that, but it does feel that way sometimes, that it's more about the journey than the way things end, and things are very rarely satisfying. So I agree. In fact, and people should know, and I'll put it in the I won't know if I'll put it in the description, but you guys will know from the nature of the show, but I'll say it now, is that we're going to spoil the game completely. So including some things that we didn't do in the game because there are secret endings, but I do want to talk about them and acknowledge them. And that's just the nature of doing a show like this. So if you guys really want to go in blind, you should tune out now. But what I was going to say was I was looking around, I was Googling around, Micah, for just information on the game. I wanted to read the official wiki on Wikia or whatever it is for it, which wasn't very good. There wasn't a lot there. And then I was just looking for things that people wrote about the story and the way it connected to the messenger and what they thought. But one of the things I came across, and I usually don't look at stuff like this, but there was just such there was not very much. I was surprised by how little people were kind of trying to dissect the story and all of that. But I found a few Reddit threads and I went into them, and it's not usually the stuff I go look at, especially because it's a lot of criticism of the game. And I was interested to find that a lot of people are soft on this game, and that it starts out and is very attractive to them early on, and then by the end they just don't even really want to be playing it anymore. And I can't say that I'm not going to say that that's the overwhelming experience. The game is like in the high 8s or low 9s on Metacritic. Obviously people love it. It sold a lot of copies, but I did look at the trophies and achievements and everything, and it does, and I was showing you, like, people really fall off the game completely. I think not even half of the people that play the game get to the first boss. So it's like shedding lots of people as it plays. And I can see the different reasons why. I don't think the story is particularly strong, but it was interesting to see that other people felt somewhat negatively about it, because I didn't feel nearly that negatively about it. I thought Sea of Stars was really great. I think it has some problems. I think that a lot of the problems are overcome by the things it does right, though. And while it's probably not, maybe a little lost on you and others that are younger or didn't play these games, I mean, the odes to Chrono Trigger are obvious, but I actually think the game is kind of like Breath of Fire-ish as well. And especially in the Breath of Fire, of course, is a Capcom franchise that began in 1993, 94 in the West on SNES. We got a game in 95 and SNES, Breath of Fire 2, then 97/98 for 3. I want to say 2000 for 4. Those were both on PS1. Dragon Quarter, which was the 5th one, was on PS2 in like 2002 or 2003. And then the series kind of went away with it, except for a Japanese release. But the main character of that game, over those games, is this kind of like dragon human type character named Ryu. And he has the same color hair basically as the blue hair, like that blue. When I first looked at screenshots of this, I was like, oh my God, it's like totally Breath of Fire. And I'd be shocked if that aesthetic from Breath of Fire, just in terms of the world and everything else, didn't carry through as well. And of course, Chrono Trigger heavily inspired this game too. And you can see that in the combat. I mean, it goes as far as the attack X Strike in the game is an attack from Chrono Trigger, and X Strike is Chrono and Frog, I think, in Chrono Trigger attacking together, and X Strike in this, I think, is like the two Solstice Warriors attacking together. So that was kind of cool. So there are some overt references to it as well, but I think the design and the world and stuff kind of reeks of Breath of Fire a little bit. I'd be interested to know what people thought of that. And of course, the Messenger itself, which was a side-scrolling action game that really turned into more of a Metroidvania as you went on, was very inspired by Ninja Gaiden. So you can see all of that there, and I think that that's really great as well. But since you brought up the combat, I want to start there, and we can begin there. I really enjoyed the combat system. Talk to me a little bit about what you enjoyed about it, how it works, and why you think it's worth recommending.
Yeah, so one thing I'll definitely note in terms of people maybe falling off the game a little bit early, I agree with that, because I noticed one thing is just that the game starts off really slow. And it's not just that the story is progressing slowly, it's that you don't unlock the full abilities of combat for a while. So within the combat, one of the things you can do is that if you do a physical attack on an enemy, they drop these little energy balls basically, and you can pick those up and then add elemental attacks to your physical attacks, which is huge for the different combos kind of that you do. But you don't unlock that for a while. So the combat feels way too simple at first. I mean, you have the timed element to it that adds a little bit of challenge. But once you have that down, in my opinion, the first few hours, the combat feels really simple. And it wasn't very challenging at all. I started to wonder, if this is the whole game, it's going to be a breeze. And then once they add on that other element, and that's kind of where you get a little more strategy involved, which is what I really enjoyed about the game, that mixes it up in a delightful way. But I totally understand people kind of falling off before that point, because the combat does seem overly simple. I think the entire combat system is very easy to understand. It's one of those things that's a little harder to master as you get the timing down for attacking, blocking, and then, getting the combos right so that when somebody, if an enemy is doing like spell casting, for example, sometimes they'll pop up these little icons. And if you do the correct move set, you can totally like shut down the spell that they're casting. That's awesome. That's one of my favorite things in the game in terms of strategy and deciding, do I heal this turn? Do I stop their spell that they're casting? Like just making those decisions is really fun and just something that keeps me engaged. But it is just an overall system that is pretty simple to understand, I think, once you're into it. It's something that I saw people talking about the game online saying that it was made for children. And I definitely don't agree that it's made for kids. I think the game is appropriate. I think it's an appropriate story. I think that gamers of all ages could enjoy this. But I don't think the combat is so simplistic that you would call this a kid's game.
No, it's way more complex. It's way more complex than your standard JRPG, I think. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, it surprised me because I was like, I don't see that at all. I think some things are a little bit easy in the way that, like how you don't really need too many items, for example. Like, all you have is your like, food for healing during battles, right? Some of that stuff keeps the game relatively simple. But otherwise, it struck me as odd that people were saying the game was made for children because it was simple to understand. But I still felt like the combat was pretty difficult to master certain times. There were some enemies that I could not block their hits. Like I could not get a read on them. There were just some of them that I'm like, I can never figure out when this guy's going to hit me and actually block at the right time. But that kept me engaged because I just always was trying to be better and trying to just, improve at the combat. So that was, for me, the favorite part of the game was the combat system. I did not get sick of the battles. Once you unlock all the abilities and then as you progress, you unlock better combos, with the new party members you get. That kept me totally engaged the whole way through the story because you kept unlocking new moves. So the combat for me was, A+.
Yeah, I enjoyed the combat as well. And looking at my notes, I had a few things I wanted to say, which was you had brought up I think they call that the live mana system where
yes.
You can, I didn't quite understand why it had to be. So every time you hit an enemy with a standard attack, 5 gems would pop out of it. But the 5 gems can only be used as 1 gem. And then you can only have 15 gems, so 3 gems that you can siphon to your character at one time. So you can siphon 1, 2, or all 3, which was kind of cool. But I always get confused about that sort of stuff, about lowest common denominator. It's like, so why didn't you just have 1 orb come out of you then? Like, what is the point of having all of these orbs? I think it's to probably catch your eye, and that's fine. But it's a nice system because, like you said, it allows you to augment your standard attacks and become really, really powerful. And one thing I really enjoyed, too, was the act of, well, I mean, there's actually quite a bit to like in the combat system, really. The farming of the MP, I thought was very cool, how you can refill MP by resting at an inn or staying at a campfire, or you can use some food and the cooking mechanic that we'll talk about. Otherwise, your MP only raises when you use standard attacks, and every standard attack you get 3 MP back. And so after 2 or 2.5 attacks, you would be able to use most of your skills again. And I thought that was very, very clever and really nice because there's all sorts of different ways you can do turn-based role-playing like this in terms of combat. You can have games where you just refill at the end. You can have games where you can use a tent or a cabin or something like Final Fantasy 4 or 6 anywhere and refill it, or just go to an inn or whatever. So I enjoyed that was a little bit of a different dynamic. And in fact, I thought that they leveraged a few different things like the live mana, like the farming of the MP, the different skills and specials. I enjoyed. It didn't feel like a game that tried to throw too much at you. I hate when games give you so many things to use. A game that really excels at giving you just the appropriate amount of stuff for the most part is Final Fantasy VI, which I know you haven't played yet, but there's all these different options, but the options aren't very deep. So when you use Edgar's tools, which are like his special attacks, he only has like 10 of them. You can't it's not like a crazy thing. Gao and other characters have maybe hundreds of attacks if you wanted to get crazy with it. But I really enjoy that sort of dynamic of lessening it to a standard attack, a series of 3 or 4 special attacks, your combo attacks that you can use with each other once in a while if you gain enough energy. Then you have that special attack, that diamond kind of multicolored attack that you can use, which is pretty cool, which are basically like summons in some sense from Final Fantasy, but in this very beautiful pixel art style, which I thought was neat. And all of that, one interesting thing I think, I don't know if you noticed this, is you can't defend, which I thought was interesting. Like you can't not go in your turn, which I found fascinating, and doubling that with the ability to, without turn penalties, switch characters. So you can have up to 5 characters in your greater party, but only 3 active at a time. So you can switch between them without a turn penalty, which is also uncommon in games like this. So I thought that they did really interesting things to be like, there's no hiding. Like, you have to do something, and you can't avoid even taking a turn by switching a character. You got to take a turn. I thought that was really cool. It keeps you building MP. It's a very, as Jim Ryan might say, virtuous cycle. And so I really, really enjoyed that. You have any thoughts on those things?
No, I completely agree with you. And yeah, it's something I didn't think of in that way till you said it. I really enjoyed that. Oh, if I just want to switch out a character because, suddenly I need arcane damage to stop this spell cast. Well, I'll just switch out that character, and that isn't the whole turn. And now I get to use that character. But not only is that more fun for the player, but as you said, it keeps you on the right track of, you're gonna make a move. If you do a physical attack, you'll get more mana points. It keeps the player in the right zone so that you're not wasting turns, basically. So that's a fantastic point. And yeah, those ultimate attacks that, you fill up the whole combo meter and you get one of those. I never got sick of using those. Like, they were always fun. They did a ton of damage. Those were things that I really enjoyed. And some games you maybe get sick of those, like maybe the animation's too long type thing. I just remember playing games and thinking, like, I don't even want to see the ultimate attack. Like, just get it over with. I didn't get sick of it in this game. It is just gorgeous to look at. I mean, this game is phenomenal. So I really just had so much fun with those two, and the various combos. They're just all so different, the way they pair up the characters and the little animations for each one. I didn't get sick of those by any means. That was another thing that just kept me engaged throughout this whole 30-hour experience, was just that I didn't get sick of looking at this game.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We'll get to that, I think, because there's a lot to say there, I think, too. It's funny with the combos, there's certainly combos I didn't even use, because I kept using Mending Light so much. Like, that was I was basically building the combo meter for Mending Light pretty much exclusively. And so every once in a while I would try something. Half the time I wouldn't even do much of anything. I'd be like, oh, what a waste. I should have saved it for fucking Mending Light. So I didn't use many of the combos. I kind of more brute forced it, which I think is interesting. And another thing you had brought up that I thought was worth exploring, Micah, was the weaknesses system and breaking enemies, which I love that kind of stuff in games. If there's a way for you to do it, whether you're whittling down a shield, or in this case, you are kind of being given the sequence of attacks you have to use within a certain time parameter in order to stop them from executing, or lessening the ability's percentage of attack, like, its power, which I thought was cool too. Although that wasn't always the case. Sometimes you'd have to break an enemy completely for them to stop their attack. The one thing that bothered me, and I don't know if you noticed this or not, because I looked at it always as a little puzzle. It would say, like, okay, 2 staff hits, 2 sword hits, a sun magic and a moon magic attack, and you have 3 turns. You're like, okay, yes, cool. It's a little puzzle. But I must say, and I don't know if you encountered this too, or maybe I'm just really stupid, but I don't think so. I mean, I am stupid, but I don't think that this is the case here. I was annoyed when they would give you a puzzle like that was in no way solvable. It would be things that you couldn't possibly do in time. And I thought that was kind of broken, because it should always be, even make the game harder and more powerful, the enemy's more powerful, but make it so that there's always a way for you to break the enemy, as long as you've been managing your MP and people can go in time and you haven't always used your turn. So there's going to be ways that you eat shit. But I didn't like that you were eating shit just by virtue of the algorithm coming up with this thing of being like, okay, you're going to attack here, and this simply you can't do anything about it. That bothered me a lot, actually, in the game.
No, I encountered a few of those, and I believe the only way around it is to use like Sarai's ability to the disorienting kick, which delays their turn. But that is dependent on her having enough, MP at that time. It's like there were times when I would get one of those impossible ones, and it only gives you 1 turn to get all these hits, and like you cannot do it unless you delay their turn. But it's like, well, she can't use the skill right now. And it's like, and I can't even refill her like skill points right now. It's just one of those things of like, nope, that is just unavoidable.
Or you need her sword slashes too, or you need like her to poison someone.
Exactly.
So I found it. Yeah, that's a good point, but that was a little bit of a gap in the design, I thought. But it didn't really matter. I barely died. I think I died twice. I died once early in the game and realized that there wasn't like a robust quick save system everywhere in the game. There is mostly. And that's so I became much more careful after that because I'm a little more cavalier when I'm like, gives a shit. I mean, sometimes I go into huge boss fights in JRPGs. I remember doing this in Trails of Cold Steel, where you would go into these boss fights and just see what happens, like with no expectation that you're going to win, just to try to learn something. And then you just get bumped back and it's like retry. And so you go, but in this game, I learned that lesson quickly that that's not necessarily going to be a thing. Although the quick saving did save me a couple times too. So I didn't find the game particularly hard. So I'm not saying that it made it so hard, but I think you could have given the enemies literally 25 or even 50% more HP and just made it so that they can always be broken as long as you've been managing. Because it became fun, especially with 5 characters and you're fighting a boss, even if you didn't really need to play so carefully. I found it fun to be like, all right, I'm switching this guy out just so he can attack to get his MP up, and then I'm switching him back out just in case I need him later. I just liked managing everyone in that regard. So I thought the game did a really nice job. And 5 characters with 3 playable, I think is perfect. Now, let me ask you this. This was something that I thought was a very, very interesting portion of the combat and the entire growth system, which is the leveling, like party leveling. This is incredibly rare in a game like this. And I love this solution. I love it. And it reminds me of games, again, like Final Fantasy VI, which I know you haven't played, but where you have up to, I think, 14 playable characters at one time. And if you just forget about a couple of them for 10 hours and then you go back, they're 20 levels below everyone and you can't really do much about it. You have to go grind their levels out. Now, there is a level of satisfaction to that. And that's all about customization and equipping espers on them and making them who you want to be. I totally understand that. But there's something cool about saying, you know what? It doesn't matter. Everyone just shares the same level. I even like games, Micah, where I think Tales games are like this, some of them anyway. I think including your beloved Tales of Hearts, although I could be wrong in that when your character is out of the party, they still receive a portion of the EXP. So you'll get like half of it or something, so I like little systems like that too. I dig that, but I really came to love the leveling system. I think this is one of the hallmarks of Sea of Stars. Not only that everyone levels up at the same, not only that everyone gets a little bit of a statistical boost, makes them feel more powerful, but also the choosing of the stats as well. So I'm curious what you thought about the leveling system. And I'm also curious what you chose for the different characters, or if you did a universal thing when you got to choose their extra boost when they leveled. Because as you know, I would choose just defense for everyone, and magic defense if magic defense was the only option. And then to the point where most of my characters were not even allowed to upgrade their defense anymore. At that point, I started upgrading their mana. And if that wasn't available, I would upgrade their attack. So that was basically the way I did it. I'm all about just taking punishment and giving myself more time to get out of, as opposed to doing damage in a shorter amount of time and hoping for the best. I think that's less manageable. So I really embraced that in this game. What did you think of that whole leveling system?
Now, I loved that. As we had mentioned, I totally am on board for the entire party, at least getting some XP. It is beyond frustrating when you have a game with a lot of party members and you do have to rotate them out. But there are times when it's like, no, this character's abilities aren't that good. I don't want them to be so many levels behind, but the reality is that they're not very useful, but I have to keep using this character unless they're going to lag behind. So I was all on board with the idea that all the characters get all the XP. That's perfect. The leveling, I really tailored it to each character with what I chose for the bonuses. So for Zale and Valere, the Solstice Warriors, I primarily gave them magic attack in the early levels. I gave them some like physical defense, magic defense, every couple levels. But I was primarily giving them the upgraded magic attack and also just the extra health points. And then on other characters, like I wanted Garl to be a tank. So I gave him like a ton of physical defense, and then I raised his physical attack really high. So I really just sort of tailored it to each character as to like what their strengths were. Like later on in the game, how would you say it best? The pink
Yeah, that's
character?
how I would say it. Yeah, or Bist. Yeah, I don't know. B''ST it is. Yeah.
Which, because I don't, just another reference they made, like one of his attacks is called Altered Best. Like Altered Beast, which I thought was fun. But so he was a character too, that his primary attack is like physical attacks. So it's like, all right, I'm going to raise that as much as I can for you. So I didn't so much go with like a blanket policy for how I was choosing the bonuses, but I did try to round out the whole team of like the Solstice Warriors have the strongest magic attack, along with Rayshawn, like gave him really strong magic attack. And then everybody else kind of tried to balance out defense with, like the magic defense as well. I did run out of the one that ran out for me first that I couldn't choose anymore was the extra health points. Like that, you had noticed like, oh, I can't choose defense anymore. For me, the first time that happened was the health points.
That's so funny because I never chose that one time for anyone. I never chose the HP for anyone. It's so interesting.
I couldn't resist. It was like 8 extra points. I'm like, that's a lot of points, man. So
that's so
I chose that so many times that's the one that ran out for me. But that was a fantastic system. I really did just like how you had the control over your party. Now, there was no way to like refund those, right? Like there was no way to because that was the only thing that I'd say maybe you'd regret it later. And a lot of games that have you sort of choose skill points or something like that allow you to like respec your tree later. And that's maybe one thing that I'm glad it wasn't in there, but I could totally see you just messing up your character. Like if you really just didn't put much thought into it and you'd be like, man, my party sucks, you know?
Yeah,
but
the game's easy enough where it's probably pretty forgiving. Like when I think about, you're probably right, but it's funny in thinking about just all of the defense, like especially physical defense I gave my party, but magic defense to a degree. I was taking so much punishment at the end of the game where it seemed somewhat trivial. Like I broke it in some way where unless there were some enemies that did like those one-off attacks that would kill you or just bring you down to 1 no matter how much you had. And there's also that, I didn't use it, but the relic that will reduce your party's percentage down to like 5% of their health or something. And there's a trophy attached to that, which maybe I'll do in the future. I don't know. But I really did dig the combat. I don't think you could, and from my perspective, having played a few RPGs this year, although none of this kind, like old school style RPGs, but none to completion until this one. So like Octopath Traveler 2 is one of them and others. I thought that this was a very compelling combat system that was engaging. Like you said, the live action to it, because when I think about active time battle or when I think about active turn-based, I think usually about Final Fantasy IV and onward to a degree where it started to introduce time as the metric where instead of, so you had your speed. So you could attack 2 times for every 1.5 times someone attacked or whatever the case might be. But this was a totally different thing where it had you respond in real time to the attacks. And I must say, I played some of this game, probably not much of it, probably like a fifth of it on Backbone. And it worked. Like I was worried about the prompt for the timing and it worked perfectly even then. So shout out to that. And it'll be even better on the Portal probably when we get that. But yeah, I enjoyed the combat, the dodging, the augmenting of your attacks. I especially liked, I didn't realize this until late. I was bad on some of the timing. You helped me on a few things, including on Zale's big fireball attack where I was just holding the button down the entire time because it wasn't clear you're supposed to let go of it. So I was not doing very much. But with Rashawn, that character you brought up, I don't know if you ever got the timing down of throwing the bottle and then he throws one as like an arc and then you have to throw that other one. So they hit each other and then they explode and they hit all of the enemies. When I figured out the timing on that, I was like, oh, so because I always had, and I wanted to ask you this next, who your kind of standard party was. I always had Zale and Valera. I would say almost 100% of the time in my party when possible. And then I would have Rayshawn in by the time I had him mostly, with Sarai maybe 10% of the time. I didn't even use that Beast character almost at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not even, like, only to get him. He had nothing I wanted, really. There were a few, I don't remember what his specific attack styles were, if he had like poison or something, but he had something where I would call him in because I needed it to break an attack. But otherwise I like left him out completely because I just liked the Solstice Warriors. And then, yeah, when I figured out again that Rashawn attack where if you just, I don't know if you were able to do it, arc it up, just toss it really fast, and then it hits all of the enemies instead of just one. And that becomes the by far the most powerful standard attack in the game, as far as I understand it. And he also has that key healing thing that he can do as well, which I found. Right. Yeah. So what was the party collection that you used there for fighting most of the time?
Yeah, so Rayshawn was a character that I didn't use as much because I could not get the timing right. I did it by accident, maybe 2 or 3 times. I got the timing right on his attack, but I genuinely couldn't figure out what it was supposed to be, like which part I'm supposed to hit the button. I didn't want to Google it, and I also just wasn't really sure if I even could type thing. It's one of those, like, can somebody really explain this? Like how, like, aside from the fireball where it's like, yeah, when the fireball is at its like biggest is when you let it go. But with something like that, it's like, can you really explain to someone like at what point to hit the button without like being right there with them? So I just kind of gave up on using him outside of when I needed poison or when I needed the arcane damage or the party healing, which is awesome.
Yeah, he has that black hole attack actually that does 3
Yes.
arcane damage, which is really cool.
Yeah, and so my standard party was Valere, Zale, and Garl, like in the beginning. Because Garl, like I said, I made him a tank. His like double attack was the easiest to get. Because some characters, it was like getting that second attack. You don't have to do it, but it helps a lot. And Garl's was the easiest for me to execute in the beginning. He has like the pot lid as his weapon. And he also I gave him a lot of defense. So he was just a real bruiser. And then, like, post Garl leaving the party, I ended up using Sarai quite a bit. I struggled at first with her double attack with the daggers. I got the timing for that down pretty quickly, and then she was like an asset in the party. And then, Rashawn, I just couldn't get the timing quite right, but his other abilities were good. So I would switch out, Sarai and Rashawn quite often. So the party was always Zale, Valere, and then one of those two, like filtering in and out. Once we got Best, though, I played with him a lot. He had the arcane damage as his element, I think. And so it was one of those just elements that came up a lot later on in the game. That was just one that kept being used by the enemies, like for their spellcasting thing. So, and I also just liked his abilities were really easy to get the extra attack. He did mostly physical combat, like elbow drops and stuff, which I just love that it was wrestling inspired. That was part of the fun for me. It was like, he's doing wrestling moves. That's pretty fun. But I kept him in the party quite a bit as soon as he was added because it was just really easy for me to use his attacks and get the most out of them.
It's funny because he reminded me, and I keep referencing these games, but I guess there's always on the noggin, is in Final Fantasy IV, you get a character very late in the game who's a famous character from the game named Fusoya. And you get him almost so late that it's comical. Like, why are you getting a playable character so late? And that's kind of how I felt about this character, to the point where I was wondering if that was somehow intentional, because I hate getting playable characters probably after the halfway point in the game. Even that, I think, is too much. I just don't like that sort of thing. I like my optional characters and all the rest, but he reminded me a little bit of that, where I was like, wow, this character's coming in so very late. And it's a good point. I used Garl a lot too until he dies, which we'll talk about. But his nourish skill was really important early in the game when you had no other option, like healing options, or you didn't want to use too much food and too much cooking prowess or whatever. Let's talk a little bit about, I want to talk about campsites and cooking and that whole mechanic as well, but let's talk a little bit about the equipment, because we talked about a leveling. I thought the equipment system was pretty straightforward. There was not much to say about it. I like basic equipment structures where you just feel like you're getting a little bit stronger. You go to the new town for some reason. I think they even say it self-referentially, because this game's pretty funny. They say, like, for some reason in every town, the preceding town, you find more and more powerful items. And I'm like, yeah, that's fun. So I like going into a new equipment store. The one thing that I thought was strange was, and this was cool because it manages the economy and kind of forces you, there are no items really in the game, which I thought was interesting. That's one thing that's important to note. There's no potions or antidotes or whatever, but there's no money in the game, really. Money is incredibly scarce in this game. Now it becomes less so when you do. So when I did there's the trivia side quest or whatever, where you get the different trivia packs, and I did like half of them, and I ended up with more than 1,000 gold after that, which was like the richest I was in the entire game. So I'm like, okay, you can break the economy a little bit, but there were times where I couldn't afford what I wanted next, and my OCD simply would not that's a non-starter for me. I have to get the newest equipment before I move on. That just has to be. And in old games, you just grind and go about your business. But in this game, it's a little more difficult to grind because the game is much more curated, which I am a little frustrated by. I don't like curate. I want to be able to grind a little bit. It's the Tactics Ogre Reborn spirit of stop level capping me and doing all of that sort of thing. But I did dig that by minimizing and simplifying things, it forces you to use the cooking mechanic, which is cool, or the campfire mechanic, which is neat as well. But I wondered what you thought of just the base equipment, and if you had anything interesting to say there. It's pretty standard.
Yeah, this was very simplistic system. You're going to go into a new town. They're probably going to have some cool new stuff to look at. And if you're diligent and go searching around for chests, you'll find even better equipment very often, or you'll find the same equipment and get it for free. That was one of the key points of, you don't have a lot of money in this game. I did, like, in the late game, after you unlock like the town of Mirth, and you can just go, and every time you go in there, like their garden is full of stuff. I would raid the garden and then just go sell all the stuff, and that's how I was making money. Because like I would go to a town, if they had like a new recipe, I would not leave without that recipe because I wanted to collect them all. And so I would just like sell ingredients like crazy until I had enough money for the recipe, stuff like that. But it was, if you were diligent and went and found as many chests as you could end up finding that same armor, not pay anything for it. And then, you know, very late in the game, if you're doing like the solstice shrines, you get some really great equipment from those. But it was simple to understand. As you mentioned, it was a little weird at first not having items. And then kind of noticing like, yeah, there's no like status effects. You're not getting poisoned. You're not getting put to sleep. A character can get knocked out during battle, but they just wake up after a couple turns, or you can wake them up with, you know, food. Like the only item is food. I liked that though. At first I thought it felt a little too simple, but once I got into it, I just kept thinking, yeah, I enjoy this. I enjoy that there's just not as much to have to buy. I enjoy that if your character runs out of magic points, they're not just stuck with none because I don't have any more items like some other games. Like it'll refill eventually. So in terms of like the equipment and everything, I felt like they progressed pretty quickly too. Like you would get new stuff often enough that you weren't feeling like you were under leveled. Because as you mentioned, grinding isn't really a facet of this game. You kind of can. I remember at first thinking, oh, I should go level up. And then I'm walking around and the enemies were just too easy in the section that I had access to. And I said, this just isn't working. I'm getting so little XP. I guess I'll just move on.
It's a completely
and that's what the game wants you
curated
to do.
It's totally curated. I agree with you. Because I got to the end of the game and I was like, this is not very hard. So I can only imagine how much easier it is if you do all of the side quests and do the real ending, and we'll get into all of that. But I was a little taken aback by that, just because I feel like that this is the kind of game that you design. I think a Japanese style role playing game you design if you're unmoored from the conventions of role playing games in some sense, or Japanese style role playing games and these turn based role playing games, which is cool because you get neat solutions like their combat system. It's where I'm so glad you brought it up because I totally forgot. The whole death system I think is really, really awesome. I love that because you can use it as part of the strategy. Like you just know this guy is going to die. In fact, you kind of want him to take a hit so someone else doesn't take a hit, and allows you to bolster yourself and strengthen yourself, or execute a last minute attack and just get out of there. If two of your characters are kind of swooned, you can still win. Everyone gets their experience points, because that's another thing in games too. I used to fucking hate. It's like, oh, you got to like get that person alive before the end of the battle, or they're not going to get their experience points. So they do a lot of interesting things by unmooring themselves from the conventions of the combat. But it's funny you were selling food because or the kind of supplies or ingredients, because I was making the food and then selling it because I found that it went for much more. Although I wasn't doing that very deeply, I didn't really need it. I guess the game's curated enough where, generally speaking, I didn't need to grind at all, and I didn't really need to grind for experience, and I didn't need to grind for money almost at all, or do things for money. It almost got me exactly where it needed me to be, which when you look at it from a design, the design philosophy of JRPGs are not supposed to be quite like that. And I think that that's probably what's turning people off, and why it feels a little simple is because it is so very curated, even kind of eschewing any kind of world map and more embracing the whole, Chrono Trigger or even like Mario World style going from place to place thing, as opposed to interconnected spaces, which I'm much more into, like Tales or Dragon Quest and things like that. So yeah, shout out to the equipment. And then I wanted to bring up the campfire stuff just because I thought it was really cute. And because there are no items, you really don't have to stay at inns at all. There are a few inns you can stay at in the game, but generally speaking, you find these campfires. By the way, I love when you go to the future planet and the campfires are metal. Just a lot of really cool design choices there. But you go and then you gather around and you can rest and heal yourself HP and MP. And you can also cook, and I want to talk about that. And I also just loved about being able to go around. It was kind of the game's way of telling you what you should be doing next, which I thought was interesting. I think this game could use a little bit more QOL love, though, in terms of a journal system or some sort of where you go, especially after playing something like Octopath Traveler 2, which I think just leaves nothing to mystery. And I think that's part of the fun. But this game, I think, embraces that mystery a lot more. But I loved Teeks, the character Teeks at the campfire, and listening to her stories and all of that. It was just... people know this over time. I love coziness. In games, I love the idea of hiding, of resting, of recalibrating. That's why I love in Resident Evil when you're in the mansion and you just find this room and you kind of imagine yourself sealed off and there's like a bed in there and some supplies and you're just kind of hunkering down like our man Steve on YouTube that hunkers down. What's his name? Steve Wallace, right? Yeah, we love Steve Wallace. So what did you think of the campsite mechanic and the cooking mechanic since that has come up? What did you think of cooking? Did you do it often? You're only able to have 10 dishes at once, so it really does limit what you carry and keeps the game balanced, which I thought was really good. In fact, I don't know if this does happen in some sort of optional side quest, but I don't think so. I liked how they never really increased your limit. It was always just, you, at least in my experience, always just had 10 dishes that you can carry. So it really forced you to make decisions, use them. Don't be afraid to use them. That's another clever cycle. There are no items to hoard and your dishes are so plentiful. If you just take the time to find ingredients, fish, and do all of that, yeah, you have plenty to work with. So what did you think about that whole system?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned not hoarding them because that was something we talked about. I started the game and was a few hours ahead of you, essentially. And when you were first starting cooking and like you were in a battle and I was like, eat some of your food. And you were like, well, I only have 10 of them. I was like, no, you like the ingredients are plentiful. Like you will find enough stuff as long as you really scour the map. So long as you're not too quick to just move from place to place, like you'll find enough items. And yeah, going fishing. But it was like they really do just encourage you, like just use the stuff and you'll have plenty of it. And that was true for most of the game. The only ingredient that I would be like really low on was milk. Like some of the recipes that called for milk, I just never really found enough. And maybe that just made some of those dishes more special, like Moon Cradle fish pie, which is the one that healed the whole party.
Yeah, 55 health and 5 MP or something like that, right?
And so that was just one of the ones I was like, I'm keeping that special. All right. That's a special item. That is one that I hoarded a little bit. I'm getting mad at myself right now because I realized right at the end of the game, there's like a special dish that you get. And I don't even think I used it in the final battle, but it's because it just wasn't very hard. But I'm like kicking myself right now thinking like I have, this like legendary feast item that I never even used. But yeah, cooking system. I like to cook in real life. Of course, I loved Garl so much. So him being like our cook and he's teaching you how to cook at the beginning, which ties in later because when he's no longer in the game, now you're cooking yourself, which is honestly very cute, a little sad. But I enjoyed the campfire mechanic. I told you it was like I was maybe 15 hours in when I realized that you could set up campfires when you're on like the zoomed out map, when you're moving between little areas and like you can hold down like left bumper to make a campfire. And I didn't know. And I was like kicking myself because I just kept thinking this whole time I was waiting to find a save area, waiting to find a campfire. And I didn't even realize that when you're on those like little sections of the map, you just make your own.
Yeah,
Once I think they might
have even patched that into the menu, right? When you go to the menu, I think it says rest now as well, which I don't know if that was there originally because I was only aware of that because of you. Because again, it was very fortuitous for you to be a few hours ahead of me because I was getting stuck in certain places or like you saw me kind of struggling with something. You're like, just do this. And I'm like, oh, thank God. You're kind of like my little strategy guide, which I appreciated.
Yeah, because I tried not to give anything away, but like there was a puzzle that I saw you trying to solve and I was just like, you can't solve that yet. Because I did the same thing of trying to solve this puzzle for 10 minutes only to just give up. And then you go back to it hours later. And it's like, oh, now you can solve this puzzle. So yeah. I did. I tried to just be a little bit of a guiding light when I could without spoiling anything, only because it's like just save the frustration of like, I've already seen this and I know like it's impossible to do that right now. But yeah, cooking, at first I was a little miffed that they only give you 10 dishes. But like you said, I would be hoarding them otherwise. If I could hold 100 items, I would be holding 100 items. And I would have just cooked everything I had. And that's not the smart way to do it. Like it encourages you to actually use everything. And as you mentioned, like you can sell stuff, certainly. So that's a great system. Teeks, the historian, she tells you stories at the campfire. I didn't listen to all of them. But I thought she was just a really great little addition. I liked when she'd show up at the campfire and you had like an artifact to add a new story to her book. Yeah,
I like how she presented, like she would present the book and it would just write itself, which I thought was really cute. And then she would just take it back.
I think I was a little disappointed she wasn't involved more, only because at the beginning, when they explained the whole thing that she has this magic book and it's the last one in the world that writes itself, and I thought that was going to be a bigger thing. And then it just is, it's like she's at the campfire. If you find something for her, it adds it. She tells you a story. I just thought the way they presented it in the beginning of the game, though, I thought she was going to be a much bigger character. Like, I thought that was going to be a bigger part to the story. You really can just ignore it and never speak to her again after that point. So
Yeah,
I just thought that was interesting because I was a little disappointed.
it's true. I was thinking too that I really liked her kind of cameo at the end where they're like about to go off and kind of sacrifice themselves, and she gets their stories before they leave, which I think is really neat. They all walk up to her and she holds the book out to them. Yeah, she was cute. But I dug the whole campsite mechanic. Not that it's anything too deep, but just think it added a coziness and a familiarity with the game that I think really, though the game has some tough themes and loss, certainly, and some violence and all of the rest. And a lot of it is about lack of free will. And I think the game's somewhat deep, but it also has the very feel good nature that I need in games sometimes, not always, but where things happen somewhat easily, where people like each other, where there isn't so much strife. Like you can imagine a Sea of Stars where Garl is looked at as annoying by the Solstice warriors, or that he's not allowed to go with them, or that he ends up being like a nuisance to the story, kind of like a Hobbit-like character, you know, in some sense, where he's just kind of coming along and barely surviving. And I think they do a nice job of managing that. And the campsite allows you to kind of recalibrate with everyone and talk to them, catch up with them. And it's easy. The relationships are easy. And I think that that's nice. In my opinion, I feel like it's not always nice. So you want conflict and all of that, but not always. And so I dug that. You had brought up, and this is a good point since we're talking about camping and cooking, is fishing. I accidentally dominated the fishing in this game. And I was telling you that
I couldn't believe it.
I caught every fish in the game without even knowing that you could upgrade your fishing rod. So, because you told me that there was something, and then I was like, I don't think so, because I wasn't coming across anything, and I didn't realize that it had something to do with, I think you have to build something in that town, and then you have to go talk to the person, and then you have to catch a certain amount of fish. And then, but by the time I did that and then found him, I had all of the fish. So I built
I'm so mad.
I built the thing, and then I talked to him, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, you want to show me your fish?" And he's like, "You got them all." And then he upgraded my fishing pole 3 times, like 3 different fishing pole upgrades that I didn't need. But I didn't. Once I realized, if you're just patient, it's actually very easy to game it. You just have to be very, very patient. Like you just can't reel him in when he's outside of the parameters of the line, and the line will recover. So like if you like when the line starts turning red, just let go of the X button for a little while. And then he can't go any further away than he has already been. And then you just have to reel him in very slowly like that. And there was only a couple of fish that I found really difficult, but I'd be interested to know how much more simple it is with these new rods. In fact, I did mess around a little bit, because next to that place in town, when you build that house, is a place where it has just all of the fish that you've caught, and you can go catch them. And you really do need fish. Seafood is really valuable in this game as far as just making the best ingredients, or the best dishes. So did you end up getting into fishing? I know you weren't into it when I talked to you about it earlier, but I didn't know if you ever figured it out, especially because of the need for the supplies, you know?
Yeah, no, I never figured it out. The problem I was having was, well, first and foremost, and this was my fault, but I was using, so I'm playing on Switch, I was using the analog sticks. And later you told me to try using the D-pad. That did make it easier, but I was using the sticks, and what would happen was the fishing line would just turn red automatically. And there was just like, you could never reel in the fish because it would turn red and stay red. And I was just like, the fishing in this is like from the get-go. I was like, the fishing in this game is impossible. The line turns red immediately. I stopped using the sticks, started using the D-pad. It was still just incredibly difficult for me, though. I still don't really understand the fishing. I would fish when I really had to, of like, I need to make this dish because I need to heal the whole party. Like, you know, I have to have some fillets. But like, once you like unlock, you know, Mirth, and you make the fishmonger's house, he gives you free fish. So I usually would just stop by his house, steal all his fish, and leave. But I couldn't hardly upgrade the fishing pole because I caught barely any fish. Like I'd stop by, he's like, you caught 8 fish. And it's like, oh, okay, that's all I got. You know, it just, so I was horrible at it. And then half the time you're catching like shrimp, and it's like, I didn't want any shrimp. I need fish, man. But no, I never got good at the fishing. I don't know. I really could not master that. That line would turn red. It would stay red. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. So I just go steal fish from that nice guy.
Yeah, I wish I had, when I was walking around his house, he has them all hanging. And then he has also like, I don't know what you would call them, like clams or something. Yeah, right. Yeah. And they would be full of things. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And then the water behind his house where you just catch dozens of them. So they really do make it easy. I do appreciate the game kind of does lean into, and I understand why people are saying it's a little simplistic, but I just think it leans into being like linear in some sense. We don't want you to we don't want you to have to stop and go fish for 2 hours and go hunt and do all these annoying things like very Far Cry or Horizon style. Go fuck off and find things and you have to build things and stitch things together. It's not, that's fun, but it's not, this game embraced such curation and linearity that it's almost nice that you can go to this town basically and they just say like, here's everything you kind of need. And if you come back in a few minutes there, it's all going to be back again. And
exactly,
it's not really what it's about, you know, which I dug in. That comes into the whole thing. How did you feel about the relics? I think they were called in the game, which are kind of these optional augments that make the game easier in different ways. I didn't use them, but it wasn't any principled reason or something. I just didn't really feel like I needed them. I didn't feel like any of them really did anything for me. But some of them make the game harder too. As we said earlier, there's one that basically cuts your HP down, I think, to the 1/20th of its normal rate. And there's a trophy attached to beating 10 bosses with that in New Game Plus, which is interesting and apparently not very difficult since you're so powerful by the time you get to New Game Plus. But did you use any of the relics?
Yeah, so the one that I used primarily was I was really struggling to understand the timing of the bonus attack and the like bonus defend. I just could not get it. Like when you do the little training montage at the beginning of the game, I missed it every time. And I was like, I'm going to be fucked this whole game. Like I can't do it. There's a relic that you can turn on that if you do it correctly, a little star shoots out. And that is what fixed it for me of like, I finally understood the timing because when I would get it right, I would say, that's what I did. And I ended up leaving it on the whole time though, just because I liked the little star that would fly across the screen every time you like blocked or got the extra attack. So I used that one. I also, in the beginning, when I was just so horrible at getting the bonus defend, there's one relic where I think you defend automatically 30% of the time. I turned that on because it might have been the section, I'm trying to remember if it was the section with the zombies on Wraith Island. There was one of the attacks I could not block. Like I just couldn't figure it out. I ended up turning that on just to help me a little bit. It's a 30% chance that you get the block. I forgot to turn it off. I ended up just leaving it on, even when I didn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, because what would happen is I would be hitting the button to defend and then realize, did I do that or did the game do that one? It was just one of those things of like, I forgot it was on because I finally figured it out. But early in the game, I needed that extra help. I just was like, I'm horrible at this. I really wasn't sure I would ever get the hang of it. But otherwise, I didn't turn on any of the other relics. Those were the only two that I used throughout the whole game.
The only other gameplay related quirk I wanted to bring up, and we can talk about whatever else you want, and of course there's much more to talk about outside of gameplay, which we'll get to next, is the puzzle solving, or what I would call light puzzle solving. I got stuck in a couple places in this game because it's because I think the game's easy. I mean, I saw it described on Reddit by someone as like a series of tasks, which I'm like, yeah, that kind of is what it is. But I dig that. I don't want to split the atom when I'm playing a fucking JRPG. I don't know. The only game that I really truly love in the genre that is kind of like that is Wild Arms, which is a game I really, really love. But it's, I think, inherently because I played it with a strategy guy when I was a kid. And so I didn't have any trouble with it. And I think it would have driven me absolutely insane otherwise. And it's the reason why I didn't play recently. I think it came out a year or two ago. The game Crosscode, which was a JRPG, looked awesome. And I played it for a little while and I was like, oh man, I can already tell these puzzles are going to be obnoxious. I can't do this.
I remember that. Yeah.
And that's just not what I'm in for. But if you just give me a thing where it's like, just move these things around and it's really not that hard. That's more like, Fisher Price level stuff for Colin, which I dig because I just don't get into games for that. I just don't want to be like, oh my God, I want to solve a puzzle. What am I, math class? Like that's not what I just have no interest in that. So when I wasn't able to solve something, which is just a few times and you helped me on them, it was mostly because I wasn't understanding the way the game was reading. And in fact, I think one of the ways the game could be better is in that it doesn't always read well. It's not always clear where you can jump between platforms or where things could really slide. Absolutely. Or what's underneath something else or whatever. Now, sometimes the game uses that to its advantage. Since you can't pitch the camera on its axis, it does a nice job of like partially hiding supplies or like a treasure chest with a conch shell in it or whatever, which is cool. But other times it obscures an exit to an area and you don't even know it's there. It's like, where am I supposed to go? And it's like, oh, just go in that for some reason. If you just walk in that direction now, it's another place. And Now, people are being like, what are you talking about? And the example I would use is Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII has this very cool, and the later Final Fantasy games do too, have this very cool functionality where I think if you clicked, no, it wouldn't have been if you clicked the sticks because the sticks didn't exist yet. So it must have been like R1 or R2 or something. It would bring up a golden arrow above places where you can exit or enter the screen, because it wasn't always obvious in in that case, pre-rendered backgrounds where you could go. Oh, I just threw the pen across the desk. It wasn't clear where you were supposed to be able to go. And so that was just a really probably something brought up during playtesting where it's like, we can just have this very easy solution that will say like, yeah, you can go here, you can go here, you can go here. And I think that this game could have used something like that just because I don't think it always read cleanly. It's certainly beautiful, and there's just no doubt about it. The lighting is insane. This game is so sophisticated in so many different ways. It's certainly inspired by old games, but in no way looks like an old game. I think that it reminds me a lot of like a Way Forward game or the most very beautiful pixel art games. And it's incredible. And the system, I was really studying it in terms of the way it moved and the different effects they use. And they built it in Unity, unfortunately for them, but the different, like they have, you can tell that there's layers of programming on the art itself where they're not necessarily animating things, but rather having like the frame shift to the right or to the left or up or down or whatever to make things look like they're waving. Just a lot of little interesting, neat tricks that are not necessarily new, but that are beautifully executed to make the game look awesome. But I just wish that it read a little bit better, because that was what frustrated me with the puzzle solving or where I was supposed to go sometimes, not that it was difficult in and of itself, because it certainly is not. I mean, it's certainly, if I could do it generally without a walkthrough, then certainly most of you out there are going to be totally fine, because I just don't have patience for it. So I dug the light puzzle solving, and I never really got stuck, especially because you were there to help me. And the couple times I looked something up, I'm like, oh, I didn't, like one time I was like, oh, I just didn't even go to the left for some reason. Like I didn't even explore this area. So it's always me. And I know it's always me. Oh, I guess one other thing that we should bring up, and this is gameplay related, is Wheels, which you got into. So that's the mini game.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about this. I only did it a little bit. The first 2 or 3 people I met, I beat in their champion round or whatever. But after that, I just didn't really do it. I felt like I was getting my ass kicked. And I just knew I needed to like sit and read a tutorial or like watch a small video or something and really get to the heart of it. But I know that you got much deeper into it, and did you end up beating the champion or whatever?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So talk to me about the mini game, and so this very Gwent-like addition to the game.
Yeah, that's actually what I wrote in my notes. Was I loved the Wheels mini game on a Gwent level, because I'm a huge Witcher 3 fan, and playing Gwent, it was one of those things that I would just do that. I would just load up the game just to go play Gwent, because it was just incredible. It's just really awesome mini game. And Wheels, I ended up, at first I didn't get it. Here's the problem. I didn't know where the tutorial was. Colin showed me where it was after I'd already figured out the game. But I was like, man, they really don't even tell you how to play this shit. You just got to figure it out. And then Colin's like, there's a tutorial. I didn't know how to get there. That was one of those things I was like, this game didn't help me out very much. But so I ended up getting really hooked on it once I figured it out. There is, I'd say that where the difficulty lies is that you cannot play every match the same. You can't have the same approach to every challenger, because, they have their different figurines and they all behave drastically differently. And so I think some of the hangups, when I saw people saying like Wheels is incredibly difficult, then the reality is just that you can't go in with the same strategy every time. If you're playing against the assassin, for example, who has a little dagger that goes under your wall, don't spend any points on a wall. Like, you're wasting your turns if you're putting up a wall, because the dagger is just going to go right under it. So it's things like that, though, that you have to think about and maneuver around, because if you just go into each match, I'm going to build up the wall, I'm going to do this and this, and like, you can play for the most part with the same characters. You can pick 2 favorite figurines and really have a good time with it, but your approach has to change tremendously. So I enjoyed it once I got the hang of it, went around and beat all the champions. One day I don't know what happened. I got hooked on Wheels for like 2 straight hours. I just went around the map, was playing everybody. And then I ended up going to do the final champion, which was like the watchmaker. So it was fun. A little anticlimactic, because all it is like, she's like, oh, you won. And like, she gives you an item. And it's like, I thought it would be a little more fanfare after I did all of that. But
I think the DLC,
I enjoyed the minigame.
I think the DLC planned is about the watchmaker. I could be wrong. So maybe we'll learn more. And maybe there'll be more
I'd
wheels
like
too.
to.
Yeah.
Because she's in the game, but she's very mysterious. And then it just was of like, you beat it. And I was kind of expecting, I don't know, even like just a big you won screen. I don't know, something. And then she's just like, oh, you won. Here's a little hammer. And it's like, okay, that's all I get. I mean, I don't know what the hammer's for, honestly, because I think it's something to do in the post game. But I was just like, that's it. I don't know. But Wheels was fantastic. Once you get the hang of it, that's something I could see myself just loading up the game and just going to play Wheels at the little tavern, because it is quite a bit of fun.
Maybe they'll make a little spinoff or try to do a little cheap. They should do a little cheap, release of that $10 or something and buff it out into its own game.
You know what though? Because when they did that for Gwent and they messed it up and it's not the same. And like, because I was really excited when the Gwent standalone game came out and it's not the same at all. And I was just like, you messed it up. And I played it for a little bit and I was just like, this just isn't the same. It's not the same from the game. It's like, what did you do? All I wanted was Gwent, but without having to go walk around this game I already beat. And like, I just wanted to play Gwent. And then they took it and they're like, we made it different. It's like, that's not what any of us wanted. I know it was popular, but it's not what I wanted.
Interesting.
So it'd be nice if they did that, but I want it to be the same. I mean, add more to it. You can add more figurines and stuff, but like, don't mess it up. If they ended up doing that, I'd be very happy, but only if they keep the core mechanics the same.
So let's move on to the game's story, which I think is probably the less important part of the game, or at least less important to why I enjoyed playing it. Leaving the gameplay where it is, which I think it's awesome. I think it's a lot of fun to play, up and down, totally worth the price of admission on that front. And again, the only thing I think it could benefit from, again, is just some readability issues. And I think just maybe a little bit more love in the quality of life department, especially with just tracking things, tracking side quests. I just think that if you're going to embrace like kind of modernity in some ways, which this game is not, and I keep bringing up the game we're working on at Lilium, the role-playing game we're working on, our game is much more literally old, where this game, I think, is just inspired by things that are old. And so I think that it should embrace just some of the trappings of modernity that I think we've come to really enjoy and really like. And I just don't think it shows you where you need to go next and stuff, which is cool, but I don't know.
No, I'm with you on that. I do want to say that quickly of when you talk about readability, there was one puzzle I was stuck on, but it's only because the way they designed the room, it looked totally flat. The room looked like everything was on the floor. The reality was that there was a piece you could like go up, like you could climb up and it was actually a bridge. But the way the camera angle was, it looked like you were just standing on flat floor. And I'm like, could not figure out this puzzle because I'm just staring at it thinking there's nothing to do in here. But it just was. There were just a few moments like that where the angle was just right, that it didn't look like there was something behind something. It just looked flat. And we also talked about the difference between, like, you could climb up like different things. You could climb up vines, you could climb up the stony wall, but sometimes they blended in, the vines especially blended in so well. Like the stony walls were easy to pick out. But when there were vines to climb up and they just blended right in with all the other foliage, and it's like, where am I supposed to go from here? Those are my biggest hangups with it. Because I agree with you that the puzzles themselves were relatively simple. They also, I felt, staggered them in the way that you'd have a challenging puzzle, then a really easy puzzle. Like there'd be one room that was a little difficult, and then the next room would be a breeze. So I think they did that very well, but I totally agree that there were some things where I'm like, I'm just not seeing this correctly. And I think part of it was just the way it was laid out and the way the camera angle was. It just didn't always help the player to see what they wanted you to see.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And on the other hand, I think they did some really nice things with quality of life where, especially when you're buying equipment, where it shows you what everyone has. It shows you if things are stronger or weaker. You buy it. Do you want to equip it? Yes. Do you want to sell the old thing? Yes. Just perfect. Just love that kind of stuff.
Yes. Definitely
just more needed in games. And little things like that make all the difference. I always say that the little things really, really matter. All right. As far as the story, let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly. It's about solstice warriors, these warriors that are born into this tradition, specifically in the winter or summer solstices. And if you're born in the summer solstice, you get the power of sun, and you're born in the winter solstice, I think you're given the power of the moon, right? And
Mm-hmm.
actually, in the game, in the beginning, I didn't even really think of this afterwards, but you can actually choose the perspective you're playing from in some sense,
Yes.
which is cool. I picked Zale. I assume you picked Valere, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know what was different. It said that it didn't really make any difference, but they're born into this tradition, and they're brought up in this tradition that says that there are these creatures called dwellers that are created by this kind of godlike character called the Fleshmancer, who I think we later call him Aforal or whatever. I don't know. And
yeah, a lot of apostrophes.
Yeah, apostrophes and all these things. And I think that if I'm recalling this correctly, and if my notes are right, basically, and I don't know if I even got this from the game or if I got it just from reading about it, because I don't know if I got this literally from the game, although I'm sure it's in there and I just missed it. It was like, he's an immortal creature who became disenchanted with his immortality and started to take it out on various realities and worlds of mortals by making these overwhelming creatures, the dwellers that they have to deal with, in which they are only weak to a very specific flavor of solstice magic that only works during eclipses specifically. So not even the solstice warrior just fighting them, but that there has to be an eclipse during that. Is that how you, and they turn into world eating creatures, I guess, if they aren't dealt with. Am I interpreting this right?
No, definitely. Yeah. The aspect of him being like kind of the reason why he's doing it is it's more subtle in the game. Like you only have a few moments where he talks about like, what about my pain type thing. But it's quite subtly told, which is why I feel like the story, as you mentioned, I don't want to call it weak, but it's not as strong as it could be because they told it so subtly. There were some moments I really wanted a little bit more of. You and I both appreciate when stories don't say too much, when they don't give everything away. I like a little mystery. I like being the player and being able to kind of think for myself of like what I think happened next. But there were some things that I was like, I don't know what the hell he's doing and why, and it just was it was just told in a way that like gave the player so little information. I almost feel like it did hurt the story.
And then there's this character that we brought up earlier, Rashan, who we know as the archivist in the beginning. And this was how I thought that the game was going to connect to the messenger. And I think in some way it did with maybe some of the stories he was telling towards the beginning of the game, but that's not what I found as far as like the meaningful connections between the two games. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But with Rashan, he is this almost Dr. Claw-like character from Inspector Gadget, where you never see, he's just in his chair and you see him from the back or whatever. But I thought it was a cool twist in the story that he ends up joining your party, although he does so with a series of caveats. And that was kind of the frustrating thing to me, is that I think he's an immortal character on the same level of the Fleshmancer, if I'm interpreting the story properly. So he's kind of joining you and helping you, but holding back significantly under a series of rules that I guess he has to interact with, or it'll break the whole reality of what's going on around here. But I did dig, and we mentioned this earlier, and I don't know how you felt about this, that it did feel a lot like the game was ultimately about free will. And I don't know what the message was that they were trying to put forth particularly, but really to me, it was more about like Urlana and Brugavs or Brugavis or whatever his name is, the Solstice Warriors that are older, that kind of take the two under their wing, about that they want to like break the cycle kind of situation. And specifically early in his love of Brugavs or how do you say it? You think?
I was saying Brugraves, and I'm like, this name sucks.
Yeah, is there an R in there, or is it I think it's just Brugavs, like
Oh, is it? I read it as Brugraves.
Yeah, maybe it is,
and
I just have it written.
But I don't know. My eyes do funny thing with words anyway. So,
but the male character, let's say, he is demonstrably weaker and less capable, I guess, than Erlina, and Erlina kind of like sells her soul in some sense to protect him. So there's some sort of tragic situation there, but it's really about how they're tired. They don't want to be compelled to live this life. Like they were never given a choice specifically based just on when they were born, and these powers and this kind of responsibility foisted on them. And they simply just want to break the cycle, which I thought was somewhat interesting if I'm interpreting it correctly. That's a kind of a righteous thing, although it's a sort of evil that you can imagine fomenting very quickly from that. What did you think of all of this?
No, I agree. So the whole thing where your mentors end up sort of betraying the order because they just want out of it, essentially. And because what's presented to you by Headmaster, is it Moraine?
Yeah, Moraine.
Is that this is the last known dweller that you're going to go fight. And, you know, Erlina and Brugraves just keep saying, like, well, they keep kind of hinting, like, you don't know that it's the last dweller. Like, they've been doing this their whole lives. There really is no knowing that it's the last dweller. But, you know, Headmaster is, like, convinced, like, this is the last one. So at first, when they sort of betray you to the Fleshmancer's acolytes, and you're like, no, because in your head, you're like, this was the last one. How could you? Like, this was going to be it. Of course, you do learn later in the game that it's truly not the last one. There's more of these dwellers, like they're everywhere type thing. And so they were right in a sense to essentially want their freedom, to just not want to do this anymore. But then you realize, you know, the choice of to sell out the entire world essentially because you want to be free. The idea of like, oh, the superhero that would say like, I don't want my powers anymore because I don't want to have to do this, you know? But what's the alternative? The alternative is that a world eater appears and everybody dies. So that was very powerful. That was a really strong moment for me when you're betrayed by them and you have to just like, well, now it's up to us and we are far weaker. We're brand new Solstice Warriors. We just exited the training facility for the first time. This was our first mission. And now we're presented with the idea of having to go fight our mentors, having to go defeat this dweller. There was a really great setup for the story. My biggest gripe is it took too long to get there. Speaking with Dustin, for example, on our recent episode of Punching Up, he had mentioned he was about 3 hours in and felt like the game was really slow. And I said, it does feel really slow in the beginning. I think that first act is too long. The little montage of how you get there, they're like hero's origin story type thing. I think it takes way too long to get going. I'm not super surprised when you showed me the trophies and sort of how many people fell off kind of early in the game, because I think it does take way too long to get to the point where you actually have something that matters. Because you're presented with this idea that, yeah, we're going to go fight this dweller. You know, it's our first dweller we're going to go fight. It's pretty obvious that that's going to be early in the game. It's pretty obvious that that's not going to be the whole game. But it takes so long to get there, and then it really launches off, and now the story takes off. But I enjoyed the different aspects of it, but I do feel like it was paced very oddly. Did you also feel that way, like in the beginning at least, that it was kind of too slow?
Yeah, it felt slow, but I also feel like a lot of games are slow in the beginning, and you got to give it a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a huge... I have a bigger problem with the way the game ends, I think, than the way the game starts, just in the sense that I feel like it's a little easy and maybe a little predictable and anticlimactic, that they didn't really take advantage of some of the cool I hate when you just have cool characters or cool enemies and bad guys that are just thrown away. Like the numbered enemies in this were cool, and those are connected to the messenger. So that was, and I didn't know that, but they're literally in the messenger too. So it's cool that's there, and there's other connections like that too. But they just kind of cut through some of the cool things. Like another thing that I thought was, so I guess this actually encapsulates what you're saying in terms of just the weirdness of the story, in that I thought that Garl losing his eye was so casual. Where I was
you did say that, yeah.
When it was happening, I was like, that's so, because at first it happened and I was like, oh, maybe he just didn't, he got scratched or fucked up, but he didn't lose. I don't know. Oh, and then you find out later, it's like, oh, that dude lost his eye, and they were just kind of nonplussed about it. I thought that was kind of strange. And, then again, I think that you could have explored more with Headmaster Moraine at Zenith Academy in Moon Cradle or whatever, where he kind of himself is disenchanted and gives up and basically wants out too, at least for a little while, which is cool. So there's a lot of things that they rush over that I think they could have gotten into more. And then when you get to characters like the Fusoyo, like Bist character that you meet later, it's like, what is the point of this when you already introduced things that you could have pulled at more instead of introducing more? So I think that my bigger problem with the story wasn't that it started slow, but that I just don't think it quite matured to its fullest extent, which was a bummer.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that, because something I wrote down as well was it's the moment where you get the backstory finally of the fight where all the Solstice Warriors died and Headmaster Moraine is the only one who survived. And he goes back to town, and that's where, Erlina and Brugraves, that's where they are. And they realize like what they're up against. Like, this is going to be the rest of their lives, of like the whole order was just wiped out in one fight. But I wanted more about that. And that because it's, Headmaster Moraine ends up giving up. He rips off his sleeves. It was very dramatic. That was a pretty sweet little moment there. I liked that a lot, the way they animated it, and actually where he like throws down his staff. But I kind of wanted a little bit more because he's just like, I'm done. And it's just, I wanted more. There were some moments that I definitely wished they had gone a bit more into, including when you go to it's a moment in the archives where he essentially, Rayshawn is like, and they didn't defeat the Dweller. They weren't strong enough. And he's essentially saying that like in every, timeline available, they couldn't do it. So now he's stepping in to help because they just can't do it without him. But he says it in like one line. He's like, and they didn't defeat the Dweller. So next time we're going to give them a little nudge. And then they knock on the door, they walk in, they meet him. But it was like, what? Even that was something that you could click and you'll miss it, right? Like, I don't know. There were just some of these moments that I did wish were stretched out a bit more. But some really heavy moments, like with Garl's passing, they really let that drag out in a good way. I mean, like you see a little funeral and everything. Like that was a moment they didn't just brush over. I think they would have known I would have been so upset because I loved Garl and I was devastated when that happened.
Yeah, it was sad. He was a cool character, and it was cool that they were all about how he has to remain within the intent of what he needs to do, and anything outside of those parameters will remove him from this timeline basically and kill him early. And
yes,
I like how he kind of fades in and out as you see him after this. Like he's fading in and out of reality, and I thought that was really cool. There were other cool story moments too. I loved the tower where the people are trapped in there because they can't be exposed to like the reality outside the castle or their age if they leave like the area of effect of the spell they're under, which keeps them forever young, even though they're obviously older, which is cool. There's a lot of neat little things, but like many role-playing games of this kind, you don't really stick around for very long, so you don't get to learn too much about anything.
No. And I'll say too, just in terms of pacing, there were several times I thought the game was wrapping up, such as when Garl, he gets hit with that like fatal magic attack, and like he's on the borrowed time, and you have to do all those little tasks. And I was like, oh, we're probably getting close to the end of the game here. And it's not the end. But it was just one of those things. There were a couple moments like that where I thought, oh, okay, the story's probably going to start to wrap up here. And there was just much more. That's another like common thing in JRPGs, but usually I can read it a little better as to like how far along we are in the story. This one threw me off a couple times where I thought, okay, yeah, we're probably towards the end. And it's like, there's so much more to do. Or like you would ask me at one point, like, am I nearing the end? I was like, no, there was a lot more past that point. But we both kind of had the same instincts about some of these sections, thinking, oh, all right, I think we're starting to wrap up here.
Yeah, I was surprised how long the game went after he died. And so as I said earlier, and I haven't done it, although I imagine you have read this already, but we're on a Spoilercast, so we're going to spoil it now, is that you can revive him, apparently, in a very Aerith, like, situation, at least what the rumor was back in the day with Final Fantasy VII, where she was able to be revived. But I think that in some sense, I don't know. I want to leave the option open to play the New Game Plus, and the trophy is called New Garl Plus, which I thought was cool. And you can go back and go from the ending and go backwards, do all these side quests. And the ending of the game actually indicates kind of the things you need to do. It shows the characters you have to talk to and stuff. And I did a couple of them just incidentally already, as you noted in the ending, which was cool. So I'd like to go back to that, but I'm ready to play something else. I'm playing Spider-Man now, just in preparation for Spider-Man 2. And so I don't know when I'm going to get back to it, but I'd like to leave my option open to get back in and see the things that I missed. But overall, I think that, and I'm sure that will add a lot to the story and having Garl back and seeing more. But as I said earlier, I think that we'll get more into the DLC. And when the DLC comes out, maybe I'll go back and try to do it again. Because if I'm going to get the platinum trophy in it, it requires you to, as you know, but the audience might not know it, open all the treasure chests. And nothing's missable, but it's just annoying to have to go back and figure out. There's nothing in the game that tells you what you have or whatever, as far as I know. Yes. So it would almost just be easier to play it again and just follow a detailed walkthrough to make sure I get everything. So I might do that the second time around. But in the meantime, I'm kind of satisfied with where the story ended, and it gave me a nice little tale. And I'm excited to see the DLC connect more to the messenger. And as I said earlier, as far as I can understand in my research, the things that connect to the messenger in this game are a couple of the enemies you fight. So as I saw, and there's a screenshot showing it like side by side, which is cool. The acolytes 1, 2, 3, and 4 are these enemies that are, I think, fused together, and you fight in the messenger as like one of the bosses, and you can see them. I should find this article, or you guys can just go Google it out there. You'll find it if you just Google Sea of Stars story or Sea of Stars connections to messenger. And then there's another connection where the huge eyeball enemy you fight towards the end of the game is in the messenger too. And that mesa place, the desert area, is apparently where the messenger takes place, and that it takes place like within this world. But I don't know. And they're thousands of years apart. The messenger is thousands of years in the future. But obviously there are all these different realities, and we don't have the DLC yet that apparently is really going to go into high gear about how these are connected, very Alan Wake to control kind of stuff, I guess. And so we'll have more clarity there. But that's kind of what I understand are some of the connections, and they're tangential and not important. Like I think some people are wondering if you have to play one to play the other. You don't. Although I highly recommend the messenger. I think the messenger is dope. The messenger is just as good as Sea of Stars as far as what it's trying to do, but with its more Ninja Gaiden inspirations. What did you think of I don't know if you have anything else. We've already gone on and on about how beautiful the game is, and I don't know if we have anything else we want to say about the visuals specifically, and I'll let you do that if you do. But one thing I did want to ask you, Micah, about what were the cutscenes. I was curious if you thought that they fit, because I remember back in the FMV days, or I think about starting up at Tales of Destiny, or was Xenogears one of them maybe, and others where you'd get these beautiful anime intros that probably took up half the space on the CD. And then maybe there'd be like some interstitials, and certainly there'd be like an ending that would be a couple minute anime style thing. And I loved that stuff back in the day, and it was cool. My honest take on this is that though I think that it works sometimes, it looks cheaper than the game. And that only works if it looks better than the game. And I'm not saying the art isn't more sophisticated. I'm just saying for what that art is, it isn't nearly as good as what the art is in the more simplistic standard game. And so if you're not going to step up in that way and be like, whoa, look at this, like what I would have loved, and it would have been expensive and probably maybe not. I mean, this game was heavily kickstarted. They made a ton of money on it. Good for them. I'm totally happy for them, but it would have been interesting for them to hire like a more anime style, real anime style thing that they could have done where it would have really looked better, as opposed to it looked a little like deviant art, I guess, in some sense.
I agree, because I love, the Tales games, for example. Right. Those always have the like anime cutscenes. Mm-hmm. And I think they fit very well, because what they're doing usually is giving the character, at least like in the earlier games, for example, where they didn't look quite as crisp, it's giving the characters a little more detail even. So as you mentioned, like making it look even better than the in-game graphics, because they're able to give you a little more detail that way. What I felt like for Sea of Stars, and I don't know if you're familiar with the cartoon Steven Universe.
I know what it looks like, but I never watched it.
Exactly. I've never seen it, but it's that art style. It's extremely simple. I'm going to describe it. It's very round, bubbly.
They call that Cal Arts, right? Cal Art style.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Like Bean Mouth.
But that's
right. Bean Mouth.
That's
like
yeah. No, that's what jumped out at me. I would have rather that the art was a little more detailed, because it is like you have this gorgeous pixel art, and then the cutscenes in this very modern but simplistic style. And I don't think it looked as good. I think it would have been better if it was like just a little more complex of an art style. It just didn't sell me on it, especially some of like the enemies and things. I don't know. It just didn't look fantastic to me. And I think it could have. I think but it's the art style they chose type. It just was. They went for that very simplistic style that reminds me of like Steven Universe characters of, like things aren't really textured even. Like you have an outline for their hair, but there's no wisps of hair type thing. And so I just feel like they could have really stepped that up, and it would have sold me more on it, because some of those cutscenes, I was just like, this doesn't look great. It doesn't look the same caliber as the rest of the game, is what the real problem was.
Yeah, I think that the game, it's not to be mean to the art, because I'm sure it is good art. Again, it's just, I'm comparing it to the mega high quality art in the regular game, which is, like you said, the animations, like they're just crazy levels of there. And there are some moments in the game visually, you fight that one enemy where he isolates one of your characters and you just fight him one-on-one and it's all black. And I'm like, this, and I showed it to you. I was like, this is so fucking beautiful. I can't believe how beautiful this is. So yeah, just comparing it to that would be like the cutscenes you would find in a much lower budget and much less heart filled game than Sea of Stars. They would have been better just keeping those things out, I think, actually.
I think so, because even when you go on like the Nintendo eShop, for example, and you look at the art for the game and it shows the characters in the animated style. And for a split second, I was like, oh, this looks like kind of chintzy, because I was just like, oh, the in-game graphics look really great, but I wasn't really crazy about these character designs. And I would never let that completely turn me off from a game, but my first instinct was like, oh, maybe this game isn't quite as like high quality as I thought it was, just based on those little thumbnails, because I was like, those characters don't look great. So they kind of sold themselves short with that, I think, because otherwise the game is really high quality. I just think that art could have been, I don't know, so much better.
Yeah, it's clearly outsourced, and they had a lot of development partners and art partners, so I don't know who exactly did it, but when we were going through the mega long credits that are mostly filled with Kickstarters. There are many thousands of Kickstarters, which is awesome. But I was noticing that there were so many collaborators. So certainly that came from the outside and they included it. But I think that they would have been wise to not even do that at all. But I don't think it really matters. I know what they were trying to do and it's really cool. It just wasn't executed on properly. And again, I think it's a testament largely to the quality of the standard art in the game, which is just gorgeous, man. I was playing with that when you can manipulate the light. I was doing it for minutes at a time. I was like, this is so incredibly beautiful. It's actually like the level of depth in some of the design philosophies and choices in this game is it's like infantilizing when I think about myself as a game designer and someone where it's like, wow, man, this is not that I really want to make. I don't want to make modern or modernistic games or games that are played more by modern audiences. It's just not what I'm really into. I think there's just plenty of that and a lot of people that can do it a lot better than me. But this is one of those where I'm like, damn, dude, this is really, really impressive stuff. From a graphical perspective, this is really, really beautiful and just compelling across the board. I thought the music was right on. I thought,
the music was great.
Yeah, and I don't know what else to say. I think I'm eager to hopefully get into New Game Plus when things slow down. Probably after we get married, and I'll be able to maybe this Christmas or something. I don't know, but there's a decent chance it'll never happen too. But I did beat it, and I did enjoy it, and I do highly recommend it. And like I said, at the time we're going to publish this, it's on PS Plus Extra and Premium. It's on Game Pass. So you can just get it if you have subscriptions to those. But I highly recommend buying it. I bought it on PS5. It's on PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X and S. I don't know if it's on Xbox One. Do they release Xbox One games anymore? They probably do. It's probably on Xbox One and then Switch and PC. So you have your options to play it. And as I said earlier, I don't have it in here, but it was awesome on the Backbone. It was totally awesome on the Backbone. So I imagine when PlayStation Portal comes out in November, it's gonna be great on there too. If you guys want to play it, it was fun to just kind of grind. No, it wasn't really grinding, but just getting through things while I was watching some football with you over the last couple of weeks, finding the time. And now that I moved on to Spider-Man, that's just not a game I can play on the Backbone, and I probably wouldn't play that on the new handheld either. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to discuss, Micah?
The only thing I want to mention is being a little frustrated with the ending, just feeling very abrupt. I understand that I didn't get the true ending, but as an example, and this is not a spoiler, but just to say, like, in other games that I've played that have like true endings, they often, though, the first ending is still satisfying. The first ending will still maybe have you meet up with the party members for a cute moment. Like, they'll do something. Even if you don't go beat God himself at the end, you'll have something. I felt like this ending that I got, not being the true ending, and it just was like, oh, see you later. And you depart from your party members. They're like, it was an honor to fight with you. And then that's it. And you never see them again. And it's a cute little ending, the way they tie it together with like Teeks being old and all that. But I was just like, that's it. Like, it just happened so abruptly. And I was like, all right, that was a little disappointing. I've seen other games that I didn't get the true ending and they handled it a little better. So that's my like final gripe with the game. Still really great. And usually I would say, like, I don't care as much about getting the true ending because they do make you feel totally fine with the one that you got. This is the first time, actually, that I feel like I'm not crazy about the ending and I do want to get the better one. I am ready to move on, though. I try to, like, stop playing games when I feel like they're wearing out their welcome. So, like, 30 hours in, I do feel like I want to stop. As you said, though, I might go back during, like, our Christmas break and try to hammer out some of those extra things. I did some of them already. But it is like, that was my frustration point of, I did all this stuff and I feel like the ending was like a ripoff.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, maybe we'll amend this in the future if we get back to that game and we want to talk about it more. But I thought this was a pretty good conversation about the core of it. Nonetheless, get people started, and hopefully you've played it and you didn't get this far. But if you didn't, hopefully you go check it out if you'd like to. Well, Mike, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining me for this enriching episode of Sacred Symbols Plus. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, certainly. Great little game, full of heart. Story it's decent. Like, I don't want to sell it like as a poor story by any means, but overall the combat is really what I stayed for. That was the selling point for me. That's what kept me the whole way through. So I definitely do recommend the game to anyone who's interested in it. So, and I'm excited to see what they do next. I never played The Messenger. It's not really my type of game. But if they did another game in this style, I'll be first in line for it.
They're apparently working on the DLC and they're working on the next game. So maybe we'll find about it. Find out about it. If they got The Messenger out in 2018 and 2023, so probably 2028, you would assume, would be the next game at the earliest. But
I won't even be alive for that.
Yeah, we'll all be dead probably by that point. But no, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I would say that the game is worth playing, certainly for Japanese role-playing game fans and people that are more curious about maybe the genre and some of the new things that the genre has done. Because I do think that we are in an era right now of a little bit of a renaissance, not only in the way because Final Fantasy 16 is an action role-playing game, but it's got a very Japanese spirit. Do you call it a JRPG? I don't know. But in terms of the more old school aesthetic and stylings of JRPGs, I think we're in a little bit of a renaissance with just the different ways people are breaking the mold and making them unique to play in their own ways. And like that game RFL that came out a few years ago was a really good example of that. And the game Fell Seal that I really love is a great example of kind of taking a Final Fantasy Tactics style game and turning it on its head and making it modern. And so I think that they've done a nice job with that here too. And so, yeah, I highly recommend it. I think the game's sophistication shines in its gameplay a lot and its systems a lot more than it shines with its story. And I know a lot of people get into these games for their story. And I would say my only reservation is, if you're really in it for the story, like really that's so vital to you, maybe you want to pass on Sea of Stars. But I think it's fun to play, and it's not that long. I mean, especially by standards of the genre, even 30 or 40 years ago, this game is or I shouldn't say 40, 35 years ago. 30 years ago, it's not that long. 30 hours.
No.
I actually think I did it in 29 hours. So not too, and that's a carefully managed 29 hours. So I think you can do it even in 25 if you wanted to go a little quicker. So it's not that big of a deal if you want to check it out. So that's it for this episode of Sacred Symbols Plus. Sea of Stars, available on your platform of choice. Thank you for listening. And thank you for your support on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia, merch, laststandmedia.store. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.